In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade talk around Erik Karlsson of San Jose. Has he requested a trade? What is the status of his future with the San Jose Sharks? Plus, the Montreal Canadiens. Are they trying to trade, or will they want to trade Brendan Gallagher in the near future? We're going to discuss that. Plus, we have a big signing in St. Louis, another PTO, and some other news from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at today. First up, before we get into the news, though, I did want to take another quick moment to do another moment of this day in hockey history. This is the day back in 2018, so it'd be 4 years ago, that the Ottawa Senators traded Erik Karlsson. It was a sad day for Sens fans, something that a lot of people have kind of seen coming, thought it was inevitable. There was a few close calls prior to that earlier in the year, and it never came to be until right around the time of training camp in 2018. Now, I guess looking back on it, it was certainly a dark day in Ottawa Senators history for sure. And at the time, it was certainly looked upon that Pierre Dorion didn't get a good return. A lot of people seen the return from the Sharks and thought it was pretty underwhelming. I know earlier this offseason, we'd take a look back coming up on the 4-year anniversary to see revisit that trade and take a look at how things look today. And today things look phenomenal for the Ottawa Senators return. I guess there's another piece here too that we didn't talk about then, but certainly does have an impact, and that's how does Evander Kane actually have an impact on the Ottawa Senators return? You might be saying, well, how was that even possible? Well, here's the breakdown. For starters, the Ottawa Senators got back Josh Norris, who at the time was a first-round pick of the Sharks. At the time, a lot of people thought he would be a middle six, maybe third-line center at best. He's now a number one center and getting paid, as so was on pace for over 40 goals this year had he been healthy for the entire season. Of course, they had some other draft picks that they used to draft guys like Ostapchuk, Sogard, Muriel, and of course, Timmy Stützle, who just re-upped an 8-year deal as well. Of course, they other got some pieces too, like Chris Tierney, who spent obviously 4 seasons in Ottawa. The last 1 or 2 haven't been overly productive, but he did have some decent tenure in the first couple of years especially. They also got defenseman Dylan DeMello, who they then flipped for a 3rd-round pick as well. So Tierney departed via UFA, of course, signed in Florida, and then, of course, DeMello was traded to the Jets. So overall, they get some pretty darn good pieces for the future, especially with Norris and Stützle. We know they're big parts of the future. Mads Sogard could very well be the goalie of the future. They get Levi Merilainen, who's a really promising goalie prospect out of Finland as well, and Zach Ostapchuk, who looks like he could be a promising player down the road as well. Of course, those other 3 players, the last 3, it's a little early to say for sure, but they got 2 stud players in their top 6, which is phenomenal. But how did Evander Kane actually impact this trade? Well, we know that Evander Kane also ended up with the San Jose Sharks via trade from the Buffalo Sabres, and at the time there was a condition in that trade that if there was a conditional first-round pick, that if he get re-signed by the San Jose Sharks, that they would be giving a first-round pick to the Buffalo Sabres. Well, he did in fact re-sign with the San Jose Sharks, which gave them the draft pick. They had to give a first-round pick to the Buffalo Sabres, which ended up bumping the year that the Ottawa Senators got the first-round pick in the Erik Karlsson trade, because that was another piece here. They got Norris, Tierney, DeMello, and several picks. Of course, like I said, those picks went towards Merilainen, Sogard, Ostapchuk, and Stützle. But of course, at the same time, they didn't know where those picks were all going to be. But the pick that ended up becoming Timmy Stützle was only as good as it was because of the Evander Kane re-signing. Had he not re-signed in San Jose, they would have gotten the prior year's first-round pick, which would have been, I think it was 28th or 29th overall, because they actually had a good year that year and went on a deeper run in the playoffs. So ultimately, that had a major impact, because a late first-round pick 1 year versus a number 3 overall pick the year after is a drastic difference. So re-signing Evander Kane ended up giving Timmy Stützle the pick to take him, I should say, to the Ottawa Senators. So it worked out to be a phenomenal deal. And we're going to talk about Erik Karlsson here a little bit further. Now, there's also some speculation around Erik Karlsson, which we'll get into here now. Good segue before we get into the other news. But there is some that thought, some rumors going around about Karlsson, that he might want to trade out of San Jose. Now, of course, keep in mind, he has a long-term, very lucrative contract, which many teams would not be fond of right now. And he also has trade protection in his contract, so he'd have to, be okay with the deal. The Sharks would end up having to eat a lot of salary. Obviously, as much as 50% is the max they could do. But there was some talk and some speculation that Karlsson would prefer to be moved. And of course, as players are returning to their NHL cities now, some of them have been doing media availability. The Athletics' Corey Masiak has asked Erik Karlsson if he had requested a trade. So obviously there was a lot of people that believe that to be the case. Erik Karlsson responded to the question by saying that he has not requested a trade, that when he signed his long-term deal, he committed here a long time ago. And even though things haven't really worked out the way he had hoped so far, it doesn't mean that something good can't come out of what they have into the future, and that he's, obviously, willing and committed to remain there for a duration of his contract. Now, of course, when it comes to players, though, publicly speaking, I'm not sure what was actually said between Karlsson and management. I don't know if there was anything, but you can't always take everything at face value. Players are not usually, at least, ever going to come out and confirm or deny that kind of stuff. It's not really something they want to talk about. Sometimes they will after the fact, after a trade has been made. You get the odd case where sometimes they'll speak publicly, but when they're with a team, they're going to say all the right things to make it sound like they want to be there, even if they don't want to be sometimes. So we'll see. I don't know if there's anything to that, but even if Karlsson wanted to be traded, there certainly would be quite a difficult task to do. They'd have to eat a lot of money, and even then, would he be able to be moved? I mean, this is going to be a big season for Karlsson. Now that Brent Burns is gone, he will get a bigger role, more power play time, and they will rely on him even more than they have in the past. Of course, a big part of him rebounding and playing even better is going to result in him staying healthy. So hopefully that is a case of something he can do, because if he can't, that's going to prove to be a big factor in his value as well down the road. So for anybody who may have seen some reports and some rumors suggesting Karlsson has requested a trade, for right now at least, he has denied that and will remain with the Sharks, and we'll see if there's anything comes from that in the future. But like I said, even if he wants to be moved, not going to be easy at all. In other news, we have a significant signing with the St. Louis Blues. Jordan Kyrou was re-upped for an 8-year contract extension, valued at $8.125 million per season. So that's his average annual value. Of course, that buys up 2 arbitration-eligible RFA years and 6 UFA years. Plus, he gets a no-trade clause for the final 6 years of the contract, which is as soon as he's eligible. You have to be into your UFA years or be age 27 before you can get any kind of trade protection in your contract. Of course, that matches his teammate Robert Thomas. Thomas and Kyrou have kind of followed each other's footsteps here, putting up similar production and kind of progressing at pretty much the same rate here. So they will be long-time St. Louis Blues and be like the next wave of guys leading this team well into the future. I mean, I think it's a pretty good fair deal based on his recent production. I know some people have been comparing his deal compared to some of the other 8-year deals we've seen. Only difference between guys like him and like Tim Stützle, Jack Hughes, guys like that, is that he's a little bit older. He's 25 years old when this kicks in, whereas these other guys are, 21, 22. So it takes him into his later 30s. You're not going to get as much of the prime years, but at the same time, not every player is exactly going to meet and fit that mold of what the prime years are and what the production is going to start to decline and things like that. But overall, really for Kyrou, if he can keep up a point per game level like he's been showing and continue to get better, which I don't know if he's really hit his ceiling yet, then I think this will be a pretty fair contract. Sometimes GMs look at these and say, well, if the last couple of years aren't overly great, we don't care. If the first 4 to 5 years of this deal are, great production and they get into the playoffs a lot and hopefully win a Stanley Cup, then they'll be very, very pleased with that contract. So big signing in St. Louis. Another PTO, this time in New Jersey. Veteran defenseman Thomas Hickey, longtime New York Islander. Obviously a player who spent a fair bit of time in the minors the past couple of years as well. Will be going to camp with New Jersey on a PTO. Injury update, Chicago Blackhawks defenseman Jake McCabe is not going to be available to the Blackhawks to start the season. Turns out he's needing to have cervical spine surgery. So he's going to be out for about a 4-month span. So obviously that's not good news for him. But of course we know the Blackhawks aren't, I don't think, too interested in winning too many games to start the year. But unfortunate for McCabe to have to go through such a big surgery like that. The Calgary Flames have hired former Canadian Olympian female hockey player Rebecca Johnston. She will now be a full-time member of their player development team. So obviously Johnston has got a lot to offer there, playing at the females' highest level and being part of a numerous gold medal winning team. So great to see the Flames make another good hire for their organization in that respect. The Dallas Stars have extended contract for general manager Jim Nill only by 1 year. He was entering the final year of that contract this year, so he gets a 1-year extension, so he's there for this year and next. Obviously, we'll see what comes next after that. I wonder if the short-term extension is telling on combination of either how the organization's feeling or how Jim Nill's feeling. What might come next from that? Will he remain with the organization and maybe in a different role? Would they look to make a change? It's just hard to say. Normally, you see most of these executive contracts are typically a little bit longer length, so we'll have to see if we can read anything into that and what that might mean for Nill in the Stars moving forward. Former Detroit Red Wing, Pittsburgh Penguin, and I believe he played for the Ducks and maybe elsewhere too, Carter Rowney is leaving the NHL and has signed a 1-year deal over in the DEL in Germany, so he will not be playing in the NHL for the upcoming season. There's certainly bound to be a bunch more PTOs likely announced in the coming days, as most training camps are set to open within the next week here. I would suspect guys like Jake Virtanen, PK Subban, maybe Anton Strawman. There's others out there here as well. Sonny Milano, I know is one name. Tyler Mott, another one. Probably a few others that I'm missing, but we're probably bound to see probably at least another 6 to 8 more. Tyler Ennis, another one that comes to mind, going to camp on PTOs, because at this point, there's not going to be many contracts likely signed in the coming days. You never know. Maybe Milano might get a contract. The rest of them, he's probably the only one I would think that has a shot, but it's difficult to say at this point. Now, are the Montreal Canadiens planning to trade Brendan Gallagher either now or into the near future? Of course, we know that Nick Suzuki just became captain. I know there were some fans hoping to see Brendan Gallagher wear this letter. In a lot of ways, Brendan Gallagher is a prototype for what you look for in a captain. A real hardworking player. In the past, at least, he's produced at a good level. Last year, and really the last 2 years, haven't been great to him production-wise. He's battled a lot of injuries, but he's a guy that drags his team into it every night. Always into it, always put out maximum effort, leads by example, just a, all around good player in that sense. But obviously he still has a number of years left on his contract, right? I mean, he signed a 6-year deal. He's still got 5 years left at $6.5 million. So that's courtesy of Marc Bergevin, who's no longer with the organization. And as much as you like all the intangibles that come with Gallagher, I'm sure as the Montreal Canadiens navigate through this, I guess they don't really want to call it a rebuild, but this retool or whatever we're calling it here, that's a lot of cap that he's taking up for the lack of production that you get. And at the end of the day, this is a business and takes, a lot of, hard decisions to make when you're going through a new regime and kind of resetting the team here. So Stu Cowan, who writes for the Montreal Gazette, knows the team very well. He writes in his most recent article that he suspects that Ken Hughes and the Habs have been and currently are trying to trade Brendan Gallagher, but it's probably too difficult right now. So there was some rumors earlier in the offseason about maybe the LA Kings being an interested party. I don't think they would be now, considering the other moves they've made, where their salary cap situation hits. I don't know that that's really a possibility, but I think a combination of the fact that it was rumored they wanted a top 6 forward. Of course, Marc Bergevin now works as an advisor to GM Rob Blake in LA, so the connections were kind of lining up there. But maybe a potential fit. Of course, his old line mate Philippe Deneau, member of the LA Kings via free agency. So there was a lot of people kind of connecting the dots and saying maybe Gallagher to LA could be a thing. But of course, we never really had a lot to confirm that it was real serious, but there were some rumors about that we had discussed earlier in the offseason. Now, of course, as Cowan writes in his article, certainly, like I said, it's a tough contract to trade right now. And the thought process is that if he can come back and be healthy this year and be anywhere near the 30-goal guy or 25-goal guy that he used to be in the past, that trading Brendan Gallagher, whether it be at the NHL trade deadline later this season or into the next offseason, would be a much more realistic possibility. Obviously, like I said, the Habs are desperate for cap space right now, and he's a long-term contract that's not favorable right now. So you have to think that it's something that they're definitely seriously looking at. It would make sense now, of course, why they wouldn't want to give a guy like Gallagher the C. He doesn't really need the C on his jersey, in my opinion, to be a leader and do all the things he's been doing without it in the last number of years anyway. But considering where he's at with his age, his contract, and if they are actively trying to trade him, it doesn't make sense to name him captain. Obviously, changing your captaincy is not something that you really want to do very frequently if you can help it. And it doesn't make sense to name a new captain and have him be moved within a year or less or shortly thereafter, right? So it does make a lot of sense that they would attempt to do that, but it's going to be pretty difficult. I mean, he does have some trade protection in his contract, so he's got a little bit of control. The contract's not favorable. So would Montreal have to add a sweetener, retain some salary? It's certainly not going to be something that would be very easy at all. But interesting to note from Cowan that he feels that the Hughes and the Habs are actively trying, but it'd be more likely to be dealt with later if he can have a bounce back season. Certainly, like I said, if he can be a 25-plus goal guy again and show that he can still play like he did, teams would be a lot more interested than they were, seeing his goal production and where it's been at and all the injuries. Like it's going to be an interesting season for Gallagher, but it could turn out to possibly be his last one in a Habs uniform if things actually go well. We'll have to wait and see if what Cowan's reporting here is accurate, and of course what Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens end up doing. But of course, as always, want to know your thoughts on everything discussed here down in the comment section. We'll discuss it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.